Hey, how's it going?
How's it going, everyone?
Glad you're here with us. I'm Allison. I own Sunshine Girls Painting.
And I'm Tone. I'm the son of Sunshine Girls.
Yes, he is. We hope you're all doing really well and just enjoying your week and staying happy and healthy and maneuvering all these fantastic times that we are going through right now. And I definitely say that tongue in cheek because it's very challenging for so many people in so many different ways. The complexities and the fallout and the domino effect of all of this is really, really quite crazy. So we hope you are navigating it well and healthy. Yes. So what we want to talk about today, because we talked last week about 2 weeks ago about ceilings, different types of ceilings.
Was it 2 weeks ago or recently we've done it? In the last couple we've done it.
Yes. They start to blurb. And if there's anything that you want information on, if you want us to talk about anything in particular around painting, definitely just hit us up. You can just go to our website, sunshinegirlspainting.com, and it's sunshine with an O, Sunshine Girls Painting. And you can just make a request there and then we'll get it and then we can talk about it. And we can even tag you on it as well if you want us to, or send you a recording. So whatever works. And all of these are found on our website too. So it's on our YouTube channel and it's on our website. So there we have it. But we're going to talk about ceilings.
Yeah. And more specifically, details in ceilings. Such things as ceiling trays, medallions, or crown. We're going to go over what the pluses and negatives are on all of them.
Yes. So first of all, let's talk about ceiling trays.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, when you have a textured ceiling, but you've got this white border that sits between the texture and your wall. Oh, we're going all fuzzy here. That's because I'm moving my hands too much. There's that flat part of the ceiling. So there's texture, flat part of the ceiling, and then it comes down the wall. Yeah. So it's a little bit like it's like a tray, like a serving tray. I think that's why they call it. There may be another technical name for it, but that's what we like to call it. So yeah, sometimes people will take the wall color up the wall and then across that little bit of a tray where it hits the white texture, and then the texture is its own color, but that little piece of ceiling, the tray, is wall color. So hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. And it was sort of done as a way to avoid crown by bringing attention to the top but not being quite as ornate as crown molding. And so it adds an extra level of detail. So there's a couple of things that you can do with the tray.
Yeah, so first thing you can do is you can keep it white with the ceiling, which adds a dimensional piece to it. So you have your texture, then you have your flat, but it's all white.
Yeah, so I like to call that architectural detail. And so you're not showcasing something by changing the color of it. You're allowing it all to be one color and just going, oh, look, there's a neat little detail, as opposed to it being very obvious by changing color.
Yeah. And then you can, like Allison said, you can take the wall color straight up the wall and do it the wall color, or you could also do it a feature color. I've seen people where they've had tan walls and they've done like a dark gray trim or tray, and then you have your white ceiling just to kind of accent that a little bit, give some depth, give some dimension, architectural detail. Those are some things that you can do. For that, it is completely personal and up to you. Personally, I think doing them all white is good, but
which is unusual because he's a pretty colorful dude. But usually I'm the one saying, let's just do it all white, and he's like, oh, let's throw in some like orange. So one of the things to take into consideration is it does change the look of the room as you change that color. And so when you take that wall color up and you go across the ceiling with that color, even in that, what are they typically, about 6-8 inches? Or
give or
a
take.
foot? Yeah. So they can be various sizes, but on average, that's probably about what it is. It can, sometimes people think it can make a room look more narrow. Other times people think it makes the room look taller. Other times people think it makes the room look shorter, or wider, or more dramatic. Or so it's going to affect everybody a little bit different. So play around with it. And one of the really great ways of doing it is you can always get like a piece of construction paper. It's not going to match your color exactly, but you could just put your, say you wanted to do tan, you could get like an almond or whatever construction paper. You can put that on your wall, put it on your ceiling, and see how you like it before committing to an entire paint job. Yeah. So that is one way around it. One of the downsides, and this is going to hold true, we're going to talk about crown next. And this holds true with crown as well. If you have your crown in a bedroom, so here, like in this particular room in my office, if I had crown everywhere, it would limit my ability to change colors on my wall. So think about this. If your tan wall goes up and your ceiling, so it goes up your wall and across your ceiling for that tray, and you want to have a blue feature wall, that blue is going to go up your wall, but then it's going to change to tan on your ceiling. And so that is going to create a whole other dynamic with your feature wall or your color blocking, whatever you want to call it, and the color of your tray. And you're not going to be able to change the color of your tray to blue on that blue wall. So it will change how you see it and which colors you can use. What happens with crown molding is if you do your whole crown molding hang on a second, Tammy, you got a really great question here, and we're going to get to it in just 1 second. Thanks for asking it. But if I don't finish my thought, I'm going to get old lady brain, and I'm never ever going to get back to it. You don't have to be like that. So if you have white crown molding and you've painted your wall, say a light blue, and then on a feature wall you've gone dark blue, and blue seems to be my color today, I don't know. The dark blue, where it touches the crown, is going to make the crown look more white than where the crown hits the really pale walls. And so it may look like your crown molding actually is mistinted. So something to take into consideration. But I want to bring on Tammy's question here, because she said, what paint is best on paneling? So we'll get back to ceilings in a second. Do you want to address this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Tammy. Hope you're doing well. Best paint for paneling. Now, it really depends on what kind of paneling it is. Has it been previously painted? All those things. If it hasn't been previously painted, you're going to have to use a primer on it. There are primers out there from Sherwin-Williams who we use that are a latex-based primer that will go over it sufficiently, bond to it, and allow your paint to bond to it. Typically, though, you're going to want to use an oil just because it is got better adhesion. It will prevent any kind of staining coming through for sure. Not kind of, oh, I'm going to slap on the wall and hope and see. Yeah. And then at that point, you can put on any kind of latex paint you want over top of it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And another thing to take into consideration too is the pile of the roller that you're using, because you know paneling has all those little grooves. Some people I've seen go through and they fill all of those to try to create a flat, totally flat wall, and it doesn't look like any paneling. But if you're not going to fill those, if you use too small of a pile on a roller, then it may not hit all of those cracks, and then you're brushing all of those.
And pile means the thickness of a roller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you can get a roller. So if this is your roller, the hairs that sit up on it, that's your pile. Yeah. So you can get hairs that sit up a little bit and hairs that sit up a lot. I'm exaggerating. But if you get them deeper, they're going to fit into those, cover those grooves a whole lot better. Yeah. Whenever we're dealing with wood, we always want to think about wood gives off oils and tannins, and that will bleed through latex paint like you would not believe. And so as a general rule of thumb, if you can put an oil, if you can handle the oil, that's great. If you do have to use a latex, I would suggest doing a sample patch first. And if you get that weird watermarking, it may push through your latex.
And it's really easy to see it. It becomes a yellow, red, like it becomes yellow, and so it's not mistakable of wet.
Yeah.
You can't mistake what it looks like.
We usually just bite the bullet, and often we will just use the oil if we're not sure. If we know exactly what we're painting, then we might use the latex. So I hope that helps. Happy painting. If you were closer, we'd come and do it for you.
Yes.
So back to ceilings. So crown. Is crown a good idea?
Well, again, it's all personal preference. Everything that we're talking about here with ceilings, a lot of the stuff that we talk about comes down to personal preference. We can give you professional advice, but if you don't like the look, then it doesn't really matter for you. This is what we would do and what we would recommend. Crown it's a difficult.
Actually, I'll just back. We tend not to recommend. So I want to just sort of call that out. Like oh, you're welcome, Tammy. One of our things here is that we'll try to give you as many varieties as possible so that you can sort of start playing around with all of them in your head, then you can decide what's best. But we're not going to come here and go, oh, you have to put crown molding in here. We will not make that level of recommendation. Other companies might, and that's totally their prerogative, their business. We are very, very much focused on let's figure out what's best with you for you, and we will give you as many things that we know of as possible to narrow it down to what's best for you.
I should have said it that way. Didn't. So my apologies.
That's what I'm here for. I still get to be mom. Carry on, son.
And yeah, so crown is one of those things like Allison was talking about. It can really change the look of the room entirely, and it can prevent what you do to a room based on what you're doing with your crown. Some people, like us, we paint our trim the same color as the walls. People may do that with a crown, which is kind of silly to have crown if you're going to do that because it'll kind of.
I don't know about that. I think it's a really great architectural detail, right?
Personally,
and so
yeah.
for me, the only way I would like to see crown in a house, for me personally, is to match it out to the wall. Maybe do it in a semi-gloss, have my walls in an eggshell, or have an eggshell, my walls in a matte, and have it all the same color. So it's just like, oh look, yeah, there's crown molding in here. But I don't care for trim, so I tend to hide my trim. So it's different strokes for different folks, and the more you accent a crown in your house, the more formal your space is going to look. Yeah,
for sure.
And sometimes it can hide some sins too. Like sometimes that corner was just never finished well, where the ceiling meets the wall and the tape's all coming down and there's nail pops and it just didn't quite get finished right. Crown is good for hiding that. But then you get to decide how much you actually want to see the crown.
Yeah.
So there's multi-levels to all of this. And again, play around, look at lots of pictures and see what feels the best to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And with crown with textured ceilings, it does make it a little bit more difficult because that caulking line that you have to fill becomes a little bit harder and a little bit, you won't get nice lines typically. So that's something you have to look at with textured ceilings.
So what Tone is talking about there is when you have your textured ceiling, it's all bumpy, and you've got your crown going up to it. You've got this bump coming up against the straight surface of your crown, which means it's not going to be a really tight edge. And so then you're caulking all those little gaps that are up there. So I have a story for crown. There was a client that we had one time, and her husband wanted to have crown molding put in their living room, and they couldn't decide on it. So they hired a decorator, and the decorator came in and said, oh my goodness, you can't possibly put crown molding on a textured ceiling. We have to take all that texture off, which is a job and a half. It can be done, but it's not quite as simple as most people think it is. So they ended up getting that down. And then she was like, well, and while we're at it, I don't understand why you have this wall here and that door's on the wrong door. And you really, like, are you keeping this flooring and this baseboard? $200,000 later, they got their crown molding and a whole bunch of other things that they didn't ask for. So keep in mind, renovations can be a very, very slippery slope. So get really clear on what it is that you want and why you want it before opening that can of worms. Yeah. So it leaves a gap. If you have a textured ceiling, it leaves those little gaps. You probably want to get them filled because they look a little bit unfinished. And it can be when you want to change color on your crown and your ceiling. That's what Tom's talking about. That line could maybe look a little bit wobbly. Yeah. Yeah, because we know what we're talking about. We see this all the time. That doesn't necessarily mean that you do. So we're trying not to talk too much industry talk. Okay. All right. Medallions. What are medallions?
Medallions are things like where you have a chandelier or something hanging from the ceiling. It is where the electrical plate sits, where your light will hang from. So it's a decorative piece that typically sits in the middle of your ceiling as a accent feature point for like a big chandelier or something like that.
And we see it a lot in sort of pre-Victorian houses, or rather Victorian, pre-Victorian, Victorian for sure. You know, on Nay Street off Hammond Bay, they have this row of houses that are all Victorian houses, and I bet inside of each and every one of those, high likelihood that they have medallions on their ceilings.
And crown.
And probably crown and chair rails and all sorts of like really detail oriented, because that was very Victorian. And downtown might have a lot of that as well, so even that old city quarter area. And Cove, I guess we didn't even talk about Cove ceilings.
We haven't talked about.
Do you want to mention those for briefly, and then we're going to let you go?
Cove ceiling. Well, let's finish medallions.
Okay.
And then is that it?
I don't know. It's not something that comes up for a lot of people,
No.
but it is something to be aware of. That is the thing.
Yeah, and again, you can paint it different colors to make an accent, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
Which we have done, and in some houses it looks really, really good. The ones that we've done, it has looked really sharp.
I used to own a pre-Victorian house, and so Tom grew up basically in that house.
Yeah.
And there was a medallion in that ceiling, and we had it accented, and it looked really cool. So, play around with things.
Preferences.
Mm-hmm.
So in those older homes, they had cove ceilings, so their walls weren't square corners. They kind of just rolled up into each other. So there was corners, like sharp corners in the corner of the rooms, but it was all just one room. There was no breaks in or anything like that. Typically, it was done with plaster, which gave that ability to mold much nicer than drywall, and it's a little bit harder. So it's one of those things where then you get into a whole new thing because you kind of have to do your walls and your ceilings all the same color.
Yeah, there are exceptions to that because sometimes the wall comes up and then there's this itty bitty lip, and then the cove kicks in, and then there's an itty bitty lip, and then your ceiling kicks in, and so you can sometimes play around with it. It can be a little bit challenging to get good lines because with plaster it's really hard to get that perfect 90-degree angle. In fact, it's always kind of hard to get those. Drywalling is an art form. Never underestimate the ability of a drywaller to have on the rest of your house. So it is definitely an industry that I'm glad I'm not doing because it is challenging in many ways.
And plaster tends to be textured. Typically, it's not a texture.
Yeah. So I think that is kind of ceilings, like sort of those decorative kind of things. And I think. Anything else you got to say?
I don't think so.
All right.
We're good.
Sounds good. And we talked about all the different textures before, so we're just not going to worry about that anymore. And at the end of the day, do what brings you joy. If painting your ceiling black brings you joy, paint it black. If painting your crown different than your ceiling makes you happy, do that. Just really start taking ownership and getting in touch with what makes you feel good. Because when you walk in your house, we want you to go, oh, God, this feels so good, right? And that only way you're going to get that is if you start doing what actually brings you joy when you see it and it feels good to you. Yeah. All right. So if you have any questions, definitely hit us up. We are always, always happy to answer any questions that you may have. So that's it. That's all I got. I'm Allison.
And I'm Tone.
Open up your house.
And let the sun shine in.